Hello, everyone, and welcome back to OTG, a series dedicated to off-the-grid conversations about spiritual wellness and recovery and the deeper truths you don't often hear about anywhere else. This is the Harmony Within series, and today we arrive at Step 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. If Step 1 and 2 and 3 were about surrender, belief, and decision, Step 4 is where those decisions hit the ground. This is where we stop talking about change and start digging for the truth that we were talking about before we even started the steps. Now in here, it's going to be very difficult when you're trying to assess yourself without trying to also fight your impulses to justify. That is going to be your biggest enemy to your honesty during this time when you're trying to make your moral inventory. You'll have a tendency to say, but because, or, well, the reason is, or this is what happened. And it's essential to keep yourself kind of grounded in this is what I did wrong, this is why it was wrong, and kind of look around the fact that no matter what your logical or emotional justification is, the fact is that we are going to write that down as an injury to someone else. Even if accidental, it's still something that you have to atone for. And it is very difficult going through this because there's many situations where it's a gray area to you. But like I had said before, to not play devil's advocate and justify it is one thing. To just bar yourself from any emotional reaction to it is another. And, that'll get you through to a certain degree. But if you can find it in yourself to sacrifice that right to hurt somebody else, let that go, like we talked about in Step 3, which is turning it over, surrendering it, giving your feelings about the situation to God so that you can focus on the humility of taking responsibility for the pain you might have inflicted. It was very difficult for me, and I'm not going to lie, when I was going through the steps the first time with a sponsor, because at this point God has taken you through the first 3 steps until you actually take his hand and acknowledge that. And then when you acknowledge that, he sends you more help. And at first, it's like I said before, it comes in the form of the fellows in the fellowship. It comes in forms of the shares that you hear. And eventually, through that social interaction and that presence in the rooms, you will find a sponsor that's hand-tailored to your needs. And don't be alarmed if you don't like your sponsor at first. A lot of the times we don't like people telling us about ourselves, and they're brutally honest lenses that in most cases have decades of sobriety on us. And when I first went into AA as a teenager, I didn't like a lot of the stuff that I heard and the way the old-timers talked to me. I'm thinking for people to be so, comfortable with themselves to speak to me this way, and they're supposed to be sober, I expected monks. But you don't. I had a guy saying, if you want to think you can still control the drinking, that you're not powerless, I'll give you money to go out and drink. That's kind of how it was when I came into the meetings. They're a little bit more politically correct, I think, but every once in a while you'll get a gem. My sponsor, Charlie, Nuclear Charlie, he was one of those people. He had like 3 decades on me, and I was humble enough to realize that. The man was a rock star. And when it came to the Step 4, he told me, I don't want to hear any of your justifications, I want to know what you did. And I started telling him. And when I started telling him, more and more came out, and I realized that I was purging. Once I got past the part where I was not defending anymore and just really looking for the stuff, I was trying to find everything. And it became like Easter egg hunting to me. I was like, oh my goodness, I have an attitude. I think I'm better than people because I feel insecure. I do things. I sabotage myself. I sabotage other people if I'm jealous. I had all sorts of stuff I was writing down. I was a real butthead. And he asked me then, well, what part of all these behaviors were you when you were drunk? And there were things on there like the way I would speak to my mother, the way that I would disregard rules. There was just blatant things, you know. I one time, in a drunken blackout, stripped down naked and ended up in a lady's garage who I did not know. And in the morning, I had no idea how I'd gotten there. I thought I was kidnapped. I was naked in some lady's garage, and somebody took a crap at the end of this mattress that I was laying on when I woke up, and I had no idea. I thought I was kidnapped. I didn't know what was going on. I found clothes. I even went up to the house, because that's how much I was still drunk, and knocked on the door. The old woman inside was probably scared to death, because I was on my way walking home when I was picked up by the police and brought back to the house and identified. So yeah, I would definitely put that down. But that's because that is something that I not normally would do unless I was under the influence of alcohol. It was horrible having to clean that up while the old woman basically called me every name in the book and gave me the riot act in front of the two cops, and all I could do was sit there in my humility and cry. I was a college student, I was hungover, and I did not believe this was happening to me. But these are the wonderful places that, alcohol took me. It took me to jail many times too. Not fun. And these are the things I have to put down. And there were times when I had left a bar and I was drunk and I was very skeptical as to whether I could maintain my eyesight on my way home. I was like looking through a tunnel and completely fell out somewhere between the club and my apartment in the city. And it was in walking distance. But I ended up waking up in the hospital. Someone had taken my shoes and my wallet. And I ended up having to walk home, slung out and hungover the next day because I guess soiled myself, and they put me in like those cheap scrub things that are just kind of disposable, and that's what I walked home with. Talk about a walk of shame. But nobody even knew about that because I lived by myself in the city. I guess it doesn't matter how far you go off grid, there's always going to be a plane. So it's an imperfect world, and this is where we write down the imperfections. I feel like it's easier to do with a sponsor. They keep you a little bit more focused. They will let you know when you're going too deep on things. You don't have to put things in there if you don't feel like it damaged you or anybody else. There are some things that are just weird things that we do. Don't judge them if they're not judgeable, because we're looking at the things that are causing you a moral deficit. So that is definitely what we want to write down in step 4. So now that we have a basic overview of what the expectations of the steps are, let's go a little bit deeper into that. I had a very good sponsor. Again, I mentioned his name was Nuclear Charlie. That's what he went by. My steps took place for the most part in his kitchen, at the table where many young men before me probably sat. And that's where he asked me if I had the capacity to be honest when I first met with him from my previous step 1. I spoke from that. And he always maintained that honesty was the bedrock of my faith, because it's going to be what I base all my beliefs on. So the words matter. And whenever he had me read anything, he's where I get that term, the black part, the concrete, the black upon the white, the meaning. And he would always tell me, read the black part, meaning understand this. And 2 words in this step of step 4 change everything. And that is the word searching and the word fearless. And when I say searching, I mean we look everywhere, not just where we're comfortable. That means you have to get into your deep dark needs. I shared a couple myself. The one time when I ended up in the garage, I was over at a friend's house at a party, and I got too drunk, and I um, ended up offending him and got kicked out of his house. Somewhere between his house and walking home, I decided to take my clothes off and walk down the bike trail, I guess naked, until I somehow managed to end up in that garage. The other time was when I blacked out on my way home. I guess the alcohol worked itself through my system. It was too much for my consciousness. But that was also another thing that I had to put down. Uh, in fact, that one time that I was drunk and I went around and I removed all of the tags off of all of the mattresses in my house that said, do not remove these tags under penalty of law. That's probably not something I would include, and that's what I was referring to previously. But in searching, we're looking everywhere for the meaningful things that we did to others and to ourselves, because we are included in this step 4 too. And fearless means not without fear. It means moving forward despite the fear. It means you accept the discomfort as the price of your freedom. And that is a very hard thing to do. That is where our egos will jump in with our defenses. You know? I can remember times when I did stuff because I was mad when I was drunk, and for some reason when I'm mad and I'm drunk, that's okay. Oh, you messed with me when I was drunk. Well, how dare I be drunk in their presence? You know, so in those situations, you kind of see things for what they are when you are retrospectively looking at it, purging guilt and purging shame. You have these gifts of those sensations to let you know where your soul's telling you were wrong. And as you write them down on these pages, you lock them into the pages. The lines of the page are the bars that hold these inventories away from you. So the more searching and the more fearless you are, the more clean you become. Like I told you before, it was like an Easter egg hunt. I was elated to find all of my flaws and all of my character defects and all of the shortcomings that they are, which we'll get to naming those a little bit later. But, you know, when I began the moral inventory, my sponsor told me that the big book suggests writing it down, not thinking it through, not talking it out, but putting it on paper as you verbally tell them to your sponsor. Why? Because the paper doesn't lie. And what you said is down there on that paper. And your sponsor can use that. Once it's written, you can soften the edges or conveniently forget it later. You can sum things up in just the way it made you feel. I went out on a relapse one time. And when I came back, it was just such a long, convoluted story, and I was so shameful, and all I could say to sum it all up was it was one hell of a night. And he made me write that down. One hell of a night, because that emotional impact of that statement sums it all up for me in a nutshell. And that was very helpful to me. Very helpful to me because it tells the whole story. It was very important for me to understand that because I had a lot to write. So once it's written, there it is before you. It's the mirror. And your inventory really kind of covers 4 main areas. And those are usually your resentments. Like, who are you angry with? What happened that made you angry? You know, how did that affect you? Was it beneficial? Does it limit you? Does it isolate you? Does it minimize what you can do within a family system or within the circle of friends or work? You know, these are the things that we want to write down. What pisses you off? Now, the second one, I would say, is probably fears. Because what are you afraid of losing? What's underneath those fears? Do you feel inadequate around people? Do you have unresolved things that might make you irritable more than usual? Do you have things about you that you can't control that are just negative? Or behaviors that kind of highlight the fact that you're not always consciously aware of other people's feelings? Do you feel like you won't succeed in life, or does just the general existence in life cripple you? These are all truths. It goes back to what I was saying before. These are the things that may be your snare. But only by undoing the snare can you set yourself free. So, the third one would be, what harm have you done to others? Who have you hurt? How have you hurt them? Why did you hurt them? I think it's very important to examine the why. If you didn't mean to intentionally hurt them, that is a different moral weight than you intentionally did it because you were drunk and out of control emotionally. There's varying degrees of that, and there's varying degrees of grace that go along with that. But you need to know, how did you hurt them? And the last one is sex conduct and relationships. Where have you been selfish? Where have you been dishonest? Or perhaps inconsiderate? Did you say some horrible things to the person that's supposed to be your other half? Did you say some things that maybe were true but unkind? Did you cheat because you were drunk? Perhaps they cheated on you because you were drunk. That can also be a damaging thing. For example, if I resent a former friend because they betrayed me, and I write the name, the cause, and how it affects me, self-esteem, security, relationships, ambition, pride, then I look at my part. Maybe I gossiped about them first, or maybe expectations were unrealistic. The inventory isn't about proving that, I'm always wrong. It's about finding the truth, even when the truth points back at you. So, if I resent my friend because they betrayed me, is it truly justifiable if it's injuring me? I like to think that anger, and this is how my sponsor always told it to me, anger is a punishment that we give ourselves for what somebody else did to us. And I thought that was beautiful, because he also in the same sentence will tell me that surrendering is letting go of my right to hurt you. It's also forgiveness. And I thought that was rather profound. So we tend to make things more difficult than they have to be. It's hard enough just by nature of what we're doing. But the hardest part is realizing that we can't edit the truth to make ourselves look better to ourselves. Many of us grew up thinking survival depended on keeping up appearances. Step 4 says no more masks. And I know when I was speaking about the truth, I said you can hand tailor your truth, but that's within the confines of what reality is. Like, for example, in my family, I have many active alcoholics. My truth is that I have alcoholism, that I am living in a home where there are active alcoholics who are not like me and don't see me as an alcoholic because they are in denial. That is a truth. That is my truth that I choose to believe, as opposed to there is no problem here at all. We're all just drinkers, and some of us are more sloppy than others. That can't be my truth. So though that's the collective truth I live in, the truth I choose to live by is that I am an alcoholic who needs this program. And that's what I breathe my faith into. Now, whether I've gotten into fights with them and called them names over this, that's a little bit different story. And I did. When I was young and raw and trying to fight for my survival, they didn't think I was fighting for my survival because they live with this disease. And they think it's just a matter of my own personal willpower deficit. And I had plenty to say about that when I was young, because anger was something I wielded. I was not willing to let go of the fighting with them so I could focus on fighting the disease. And I put that down in my inventory. I fight. If I don't like you and I don't believe what you're saying, or if it affects me, or I don't have control over what your belief system is, I will fight it. I won't accept it. I won't subscribe to it. I will give you the most violent reaction possible because that is how much I believe that my ego is trying to have me survive. And, that really didn't work that well with me and my family because, well, everyone owned the house that was over my head. So, yeah, that didn't work out that well. So I found that accepting the fact that this is my truth, keeping my truth to myself, and living my life around that truth is what I have to do. But until I wrote down on a piece of paper that I am very vindictive when I'm mad or when I fear loss of control, I wouldn't have addressed it. If I didn't say I allow everyone around me to have power over the way I feel, I wouldn't have done anything about it. If I didn't say I choose support systems that are not support systems, I rely and talk too much about my recovery to people that aren't aligned with it, that's a deficit. That's a form of people pleasing. I don't have anything else better to say, so I'm just going to sit there and give them an opportunity to critique me. If I want to preserve my sobriety, I have to preserve myself. I have to preserve my self-esteem and not do stupid things like, try to think I'm going to go to the church and, change their faith. It's not happening. They got their dogma, they got their religion, they got their God, their higher power is not mine. Theirs might be alcohol, and that's okay, as long as it doesn't affect my ability to maintain mine. And to be honest, they don't really affect me anymore because I don't see it as though it's an option because of the fact that I have that buffering which came from step 4. So it's a deep act. It's a deep act of self-honesty. We take off the masks, and we're not just admitting mistakes. We're tracing the roots of our behavior back to the soil they grow in. And that's uncomfortable, but it's also where the real healing begins. And you also get a lot of little jewels. Like, it's a disease. All this time I thought that I just had no willpower. But I would sit there and tell myself, well, when I wanted a beer, nothing could stop me. So then I felt really, really bad because it's like, now stopping it, I'm weak. But when I was told that it was a disease, that changed things. I could put myself in a better place because I understood that, I can't stand that close next to alcohol. So step 4, from a spiritual perspective, is not a self-condemnation exercise. It's a house cleansing. It's imagine your life as a home. And once you've lived in so long that, you no longer notice the dust in the corners or the leaks in the roof, step 4 is when you turn on all the lights. You're opening up all your closets, and you're saying things exactly as they are. In spiritual terms, the act of honest self-examination is a form of prayer. You're saying to God, I'm willing to know the truth. Show me what I have been blind to. And God answers. And it may be through your sponsor, but your sponsor will answer you too. Any questions you have can align you with your spiritual element. So, what does step 4 give you back? Well, addiction robs us of clarity. It robs us of our self-respect and purpose. Step 4 challenges us. It begins a process of giving back. Because you will achieve your clarity. You see the patterns, you keep track. You'll become more responsible because you're taking responsibility. You begin to understand your part in your own pain and how that pain connects to others. And the best part is you get hope. If you can name it, if you can write it down, you can change it. You can change anything if you write it down. The black part is essential to understand and to read. But even more so when you're writing it in your life. So, practical ways to do this. I write daily. I don't try to finish all my writing in one sitting. I'll take my time and I'll remember and I'll reflect over what it is I'm doing now. Because you never stop doing the steps. And my last time doing it, I, look forward to it. It's like spring cleaning to me. And I follow my own little guide. I make columns. They're also suggested in the big books. Or you can even get worksheets from your sponsor, or your sponsor can even help you make those columns. And, those 4 columns for me, like I told you before, are my resentments, my fears, how I've harmed others and myself, and my sex conduct and relationships. But I do make it a point to sit there and out of all of those columns, say, if I was not drinking, which ones would not exist at all? And I cross those out of my columns. Just to give me a little bit of, idea of what is you, what is not you. There is a Dr. Jekyll and a Mr. Hyde both, and they are quite different. One's real, one's not. And it's very important to understand that there is a part of you that will go away. That part of you that you loathe, that part of you that you dislike, that will go away. The part of you that got drunk and did whatever it was that you did that you normally wouldn't do, that will go away. So, follow your guide, follow those columns. And it's important to stay prayerful. And what I mean by that is begin and end each of your writing sessions with a prayer when you do step 4. A simple prayer for honesty. Something along the lines of, Dear God, please open myself to the honesty and to the mirror that I hold within. Show me what it is that I need to replace in me. Something simple like that. And don't judge yourself too soon. This is a fact-finding mission. You're not sentencing yourself to anything other than a life of happiness. So, be easy with it, be thorough, be searching and fearless, and you shall prosper in this step. Just look for the patterns. I say keep finding the patterns. For example, I may find myself in relationships where I feel betrayed a lot. The inventory might show that I choose partners who are emotionally unstable or unavailable. I ignore the early warning signs. I expect them to fill my emotional needs that only I can meet, and then I feel like they're a failure. Maybe I set myself up for that. My relationships aren't like that now because I wrote those down. And seeing that pattern is painful. I didn't want to see that I am a people pleaser who will accept almost anybody as long as they give me a momentary sense of rush, like I have an opportunity to build something. But it also explains, years of heartbreak too. And without writing that down, I might be blaming bad luck or not looking at the fact that, hey, you're an alcoholic. Nobody wants to be around that. And you don't aim too high because you know that you're choosing alcohol over a healthy relationship on some subliminal level. That was important to put down. It wasn't bad luck. It was bad alcoholism. So, like all the steps, and I love this about them, step 1 picks you up off the floor, dusts you off, and says, hey, look, it's cool. You can't do this yourself. And it slides you right onto the doorstep of step 2. Where step 2 is like, you can't help yourself, but I know someone who can. And puts you right on the door of step 3, where once you take God's hand and you're like, hey, you're the one, let's do this. Then he's like, okay, I am the one, and here's all your army. And starts sending you fellowship, and starts sending you a sponsor, and then asks more of you. In step 4, he's asking you, give me your darkness. Give me all of your darkness, and be willing to let go of it. Because when you give something away, you hand it over and you let go. My sponsor says, if you don't, it will flip you upside down. So you have to let go. Which means if you're going to let go of a resentment, by God, when you let that go and you write it down on the paper, it's no longer in you, it's on that page. So when you leave and go home or back to your life or run into that person you resentment, it's gone. Don't rekindle it. Don't allow it to respark. That's very important because step 4 drops you off on the doorstep of step 5. And step 4 is like gold mining. You dig through the dirt, the rock, the rubble to find the truth, but gold isn't worth much if it stays locked in the ground. So step 5 is where you bring that gold to the surface and share it with God, yourself, and another person. So by the time you finish step 4, you have a map of your inner life. Step 5 is the moment you walk that map into the presence of another human being and say, this is me, the real me. And in many ways, step 4 is just the second half, or the first half, I should say, of the second half, which is step 5. I kind of look at how they go together, because in step 5, you have nothing really to work with other than your spiritual turning point. Without step 4, step 5 has nothing of its own. So I call them, the sibling steps. But they're actually all connected. It's like one long chain of steps. It's beautiful the way that they do this. So without further ado, I will now end our lesson on step 4. I feel like this gives you a little bit of clarity into what the expectation is of you to be searching and fearless in your quest. It all comes back to honesty, and this is where that truth comes in. So thank you again for tuning in. Sorry for the airplane, but I am coming to you off the grid with the Harmony series. Thank you so much for listening, and if you liked it, hit like and subscribe. Thank you. Have a good one.